Huw, I think we can. Our computer's been hard at it, and our experts have been hard at it too. Let me just remind you first of all about the background, the story of turnout in Wales over the last couple of decades. 58.3% was the turnout in the 1979 referendum, the one that turned down the Welsh Assembly last time. 58.3% in the last referendum. 48.8%, a typical local election turnout in Wales, while about 49%. Local elections, 1995, the last local elections in Wales, was a 49% turnout. General election, typically the Welsh vote, something like 3/4 of the Welsh people vote. In general election, 73.5% turnout. Now this time, our estimate is that the turnout is just going to pip 50%, 51%, as Huw said, 57% in Anglesey, 52% in Neath. It's going to be just through 50%, we reckon, 51% turnout. Now, that allows us to reckon that the total votes cast, because we know the Welsh electorate, are going to be something like 1,170,000. Half the total vote cast, then, is 570,000. That's our estimate of the winning post, therefore, for the yeses and the noes down here. So the pile that reaches that winning post, half the total votes cast, and that, by the way, will vary through the night as our winning post adjusts itself as we get more and more turnouts declaring. That, we reckon, is the winning post. A long way to go so far. No, just one result in, the noes winning in Wrexham. Huw.
Peter, thanks very much. Another relatively high turnout figure we've just got from Ceredigion, that's Cardiganshire. That's another 57%, which, if it's borne out, will be as high as the turnout figure on Anglesey. And though 57%, as I say, would not normally be very impressive, given tonight's figures, it is. Now, let's just have a quick word with Robin on that. Robin, just looking at the implications so far, as we wait for, among others, Newport, Flintshire, Bridgend, Denbigh and Merthyr to come in. Just looking at that turnout figure there, 57% Ceredigion, 57% in Anglesey, and the overall turnout figure of some 52%. Now, if that works out, that's a little more respectable, isn't it?
It is more respectable. I think I'm sure Peter's predictions and the computer's predictions there will be very much in line with what we see at the end of the day, and so long as they're over that crucial psychological 50%, then I think the government will take huge comfort from that, assuming that they get their majority vote for the Assembly. Anything below 50%, I think psychologically makes a lot of difference in terms of the kinds of arguments that we will hear. That is just about the minimum that they would find acceptable, and they will certainly hope that makes life a little bit easier in Parliament.
Barry, just a quick one to you on the turnout figures. Given your preparations before tonight, are they in line with what you expected?
Yes, I think expectation was a turnout of just over 50%, and but I didn't think there would be such a great variation between east and west, and the 57% turnout is really, if that's repeated along the west coast and in the western valleys, then I think that looks again quite significant to the overall result.
Thanks very much. Well, now we'll come back a little later on to questions of why that should be the case, why the turnout should be so much lower than it was in Scotland. 60%, just to remind you, the turnout in Scotland last week. Some people have been saying during the campaign that it's all to do with uncertainty, that the Welsh are confused about their own identity, which is why in Scotland, of course, they were bringing on people like Sean Connery to reinforce the question there of very firm Scottish sense of identity. So we'll take a trip down to Cardiff's Cafe Quarter to talk to some of our cultural lovies. I'm sure they won't mind me saying lovies. And chief among them there, the lovey herself, Linda Mitchell, is there. Linda.
I don't think I like being called a lovey, Huw, but away from the political arena, obviously people are watching the results of the Assembly. We have some very high-profile figures from the Welsh art scene. You said that Scotland had Sean Connery. We have Sian Lloyd. Sian Lloyd, you kicked off the yes to the Assembly. Why was that? Why are you such a big supporter?
I believe in democracy. I believe in a modern Wales. I believe that, for goodness sake, can't we run our own affairs to a certain extent? I want to make a healthier, a wealthier, a better, a more self-sufficient Wales. I believe in self-respect. I think it's about a lot of things, but more than anything, about self-respect for the Welsh people themselves.
So this issue of self-respect has come up a lot, hasn't it? Now, I'm just wondering, 60 politicians sitting in Cardiff, What's the effect going to be on the arts world in Wales? Maggie Russell, you're drama manager of BBC Wales.
I think it's about the signal that it sends out. I think it's about saying we're able to be confident, we're able to be sure of our identity, and we want to promote that. I think there's a kind of whole notion that outside of Wales nobody cares about us. So I think it's about time we cared about ourselves and we made our voice heard.
It is interesting, actually, because it is not just about what we think of ourselves, but the message that we send to the outside world. James Hall, you're an Anglo-Scot living in Wales. You must have been watching last week's result with interest.
Indeed, with glee, But I also lived in Ireland, and there I saw, you know, every day the great beneficial effects it has when a country takes responsibility for its own life, and when people know that there are people only 100 miles away who can be influenced by their decisions, and in a smaller unit people know who they're talking about, who they're talking at. And you can get some man who's going to stand up and say, right, I don't like potholes. And everyone gets together and they say, right, we have an anti-pothole party, and they get elected to Parliament. You know, so that
is that really what we're about, though? We're really talking about parties to get rid of potholes or whatever?
I think we're talking about making it a forum where people can actually feel they have a genuine influence on the day-to-day running of their own country.
I think it's about decisions relevant to Wales, relevant to us and the way we lead our lives.
OK, well, let me throw in a vast comment here that we might hear the other side of office side, which is, if the arts in Wales was so good, an assembly wouldn't make any difference. We've seen how Scotland has had some very, very big successes. We talk about train spotting, we talk about Mrs Brown, that's another recent success. Bernard Latham, why do we need an assembly to give us that push in the outside world?
I think it comes down to culture when you look at it. I mean, I'm an Englishman living in Wales, and I voted yes basically because I think it's appalling that you have a different culture imposing a view on a culture which is totally different from the English culture. Why? You've got an opportunity here of having Welsh people governing and looking after Welsh people, and their culture is very, 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 very tight and very important, and it should be run by Welsh people, not English people.
But people would say, why can't we crack it in the outside world anyway?
We do crack it in the outside world. I mean, one of the most extraordinary things about Wales is we have terrific links with Europe. We don't necessarily crack it in London, and in a sense, if we have an assembly here, we don't have to defer to London then. We can take our voice as far and as wide as we can make the space for that voice. We don't particularly want to always have to refer to London. The popular consensus is, unless you make it in London, you don't make it. That's not a consensus we want to subscribe to.
Okay, but very, very quickly, I mean, it doesn't seem to be a great turnout. What do you think that says about our sense of self-esteem and self-respect?
I think it says a lot about the negative campaigning that's been here in Wales. And negative campaigning works, let's face it. We saw it in the '92 election, we've seen it in America with the US election. And the No campaign have used negative image upon negative image. And that coupled with the media hype, I think is reflected in this low turnout.
I think it's also to do with apathy. I think it's very easy for people to sit back and say, well, I'm sure it's going to be yes anyway. A lot of people have sat there and said, well, it's going to be a foregone conclusion, and it's not. It's very important, and people should really take the responsibility of their own lives and their own culture and do something about it.
Okay, well, we've only had... I have to stop you there, James, I'm sorry. We've only had one result so far, but obviously we're watching here with interest. Now back to you, Huw.
Linda, thanks very much indeed. Let's go straight to Blaen y Gwent, to Abervale, where the leading light, one of the leading lights anyway, in the opposition, though not part officially of the No campaign, is the MP Huw Smith. Mr Smith, good evening to you.
Good evening.
Are you encouraged by what you've learned so far?
Well, I'm encouraged, but it's just one of 40 constituencies, so I don't think you can read much into that.
How's it looking there in Blaen y Gwent?
Well, I don't know. I really don't know at the moment. What I do know is over the months we've had tremendous amount of support from people outside in our demand that there should be a debate, and the debate has happened, and depending on the way the result go will obviously affect the way we vote. If there is a vote for a Welsh Assembly, then when it comes to the House of Commons, I, like all other MPs, will try to improve the bill, but I'll obviously vote for it, and that's what I said on the first day, and I'm repeating it this evening.
In terms of Blaen y Gwent itself, Mr Smith, despite the fact that there were prominent people in your local party who backed the plans, are you expecting Blaen y Gwent, I'm going to push you on this, are you expecting Blaen y Gwent tonight to vote no?
I think it'll probably be one of the most difficult ones, because I don't think a lot of people out there are voting for or against the Welsh Assembly. What people have been telling me that they can't vote against the Welsh Assembly, in that if they vote against the Welsh Assembly, they'll be seen to be voting against the Labour government. And I can understand that after 18 years of opposition and all the awful things which have happened to this community. I understand why people respond like that. I don't agree, obviously, but I understand why they do that.
How easy is it going to be, Mr. Smith, for you to mend fences with Ron Davies?
Well, Ron Davies and myself are just two people in a Labour movement which encompasses millions. What I do recognise is that the Prime Minister quite rightly called for a referendum, and once he decided on a referendum and a number of us raised the issue of a debate, he stated, and much to his credit, that both sides of the argument should be put. Now, I may be old-fashioned, but I believe in free speech, and that's what the campaign of the last 6 months have been all about. And that campaign has been recognised by people right throughout the land, because we've been inundated with phone calls, letters, etc., saying, you know, well done. Not just myself as an individual, but there's been lots of people throughout the Labour movement who said there's got to be a debate, otherwise the referendum is a mockery.
Mr. Smith, final point. Do you think governments elected on manifestos should carry out those manifestos?
Yes, I do, and in part of our manifesto was a referendum and also a statement by the Prime Minister that both sides of the argument should be put. So in that respect, I am indeed keeping to the manifesto.
Mr. Smith, you've been noticeably reluctant to be drawn, but we may come back to you later on. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks a lot. Now, I understand that there is a turnout figure from Cardiff, which of course is exceptionally important simply because it's the biggest group of electors in Wales, some 250,000 of them, and I do understand that the turnout is around 47%, so that's under that psychological 50% barrier. Let's nip over to Peter for a few more what, Peter?
Well, a look perhaps, you're talking about Cardiff, Huw, a look at the Welsh Assembly that'll meet in Cardiff, in the City Hall in Cardiff, which I'll show you in just a moment. Let me just explain, it's quite complicated this, but there is going to be a new system of election for this Welsh Assembly if it comes into being. And it will be proportional representation. It'll mean that if you win a share of the vote, you will expect to win something like that share of the seats. First time it's happened in Great Britain, not in Northern Ireland, in Great Britain. Let's go inside the City Hall in Cardiff and have a look at the shape and composition of this new Welsh Assembly, if it is going to be voted through by the Welsh people now. Now, there's the bird's eye view of the chamber in the City Hall in Cardiff. These are the officials up here, the Speaker or whatever of the new Assembly. Here are the seats, 60 seats altogether. People would have two votes. First, for 40 first-past-the-post seats. They would elect directly like they do at the moment in general elections. 30, if the last general election, for example, 34 Labour MPs got in. There were 2 Liberal Democrats over there in East Wales, and there were 4 Plaid Cymru in West Wales. No Tories at all. That was the composition of the Westminster seats in Wales. That will be the composition of the 40 first-past-the-post seats if people voted exactly as they voted in the general election. Now, in order to make it proportional, there'll be 20 more top-up seats. These seats over here, the proportional seats. And the way this will work is in the 5 European constituencies of Wales, within each of those 5, the party share of the seats will be roughly equivalent to their share of the vote. So, for example, here's Glenys Kinnock's seat in South Wales East over here. The Tories won about 17% of the vote in South Wales East in the last general election, but they've got no first-past-the-post seats there. So they'll be topped up, and here we have the top-up seats popping up here. The Tories with 12 top-up seats because they got 20% of the share of the vote. Here are a few more Labour top-up seats and a few Liberal Democrats as well. Now notice one intriguing thing about this, that is that the Tories become the second largest party in the Welsh Assembly in Cardiff because of proportional representation, even if they have no seats at Westminster at all. There's the winning post, Labour comfortably through it with a majority of 16. Now, in our poll of Welsh voters over the last couple of days, we asked people how they would vote now if there were a Welsh Assembly. In a Welsh Assembly election, how would they vote? And here's what they told us. They told us that Labour would get 63% of the vote for a Welsh Assembly. 63, not the 55% they had the last general election, but 8% more. The Tories would get 15%, not the 20% they got in the general election, 5% less. The Liberal Democrats 9% and Plaid Cymru 12%. So in fact, the Welsh Assembly, if elected on that basis, would have a massive preponderance of Labour members of the Welsh Assembly, MWAs, and they would have a huge majority in a Welsh Assembly elected on that basis. Huw.
Peter, thanks very much. Earlier on we heard from Peter Kellner up in Westminster about attitudes among English and Scottish people to devolution and to the potential, as some people see it, breakup of the United Kingdom. Attitudes there noticeably as well among young people. So let's have a little more of that as we wait for Newport, I understand, in a few minutes' time. Back there to Westminster and to Diana and Peter.
Yes, how much does the feeling of national identity affect how people think about devolution? Well, this has been part of our opinion poll survey this week. Peter Kellner has the results. Peter.
Diana, last week we found that a clear majority of Scottish people regarded themselves as either Scottish, not British, or more Scottish than British. 57% in one or other of those two camps. Only 10% of people north of the border said they're either British or more British than Scottish. The other third or so said they were both equally. Now in Wales, it's rather different. It's not a majority saying they're Welsh or more Welsh than British. 41% go in those camps. 20% say they're British or more British than Welsh, twice the number of the equivalent question in Scotland.
You see, that also suggests that there's a lot less support for devolution in Wales than Scotland, if that necessarily follows through.
I think that's right.
Yes.
I think that's why we're waiting for a result which looks a lot closer than it was in Scotland. There isn't quite the same national mood that there is north of the border.
All these ways to second guess. Anyway, what about generation gaps? How does that change?
Well, let me before we move on to that, I think we've just got the English figure, because we asked the same figure in England, and there England is split in three ways, almost exactly. 31% say they're more English than British, 30% say they're more British than English, and around a third say they're both equally. So a much weaker sense of Englishness than either Welshness or Scottishness. Now if we move on to the generation gap, we looked at people's views on the Assembly by the different age groups, and we find there is a small generation gap in Wales. 61% of under 35s told us that they were voting yes, 56% of the over 55s, and at 58% of the age group between 35 and 55. So around the high 50s saying yes, but if we take the difference between the older group and the younger group, just the generation gap, take 56 away from 61, generation gap of just 5%. Now compare that with the rest of Britain, and we find that in England, again, no real generation gap when people are asked about attitudes to a regional assembly. We'll come on to some of those figures a bit later on in more detail. But in Scotland, there is a generation gap. In Scotland, the younger generation are significantly more pro-devolution than the over 55s. So whereas in Scotland, where the devolution debate has really entered the bloodstream of Scottish politics over the last 20, 25 years, and that is affected, you see that in those people who come into their political adulthood during that time. They are more pro-devolution than their parents' generation. In Wales and in England also, there is no real generation effect.
Peter Kellner, thank you for the moment. Huw.
Diana, thanks very much indeed. Now then, we are expecting 21 results. We have one in with 21 to go. Let's look at the scene here in Cardiff tonight. Here we are. That's the scene in the Welsh capital tonight as the voting progresses. Cardiff itself, by the way, a turnout of 47%, and I've just been told that the turnout in Monmouthshire, which of course is not too far away from here, just as you cross the Severn Bridge, either of the Severn Bridges, turnout in Monmouth is 50.6%, which is certainly among the higher ones that we've had. Peter, they're talking, making some rather interesting points about attitudes of young voters. So why don't we talk to some young people, some young English people, Scottish people and Welsh people, and we'll go to an area with very strong links with North Wales, and that is Liverpool. And Carol Walker is in Liverpool. Carol, over to you.
Yes, good evening from the Liverpool Hope University College in the city's Albert Dock. As you mentioned, of course, an area which has very close ties with Wales, but a very strong northwest regional identity too. And I'm joined now by Alex Phelps, who was closely involved in the Scottish devolution campaign in Edinburgh, by Steve Brine, a student here at Liverpool Hope who's not convinced of the case for devolution, and Beth Ann James, who voted yes for a Welsh Assembly. Now, why did you vote for that? And tell us a little bit about the mood in the area where you were voting.
Well, I believe yes is definitely a step in the right direction. I'm aware of that the Welsh office is just not accountable to the people of Wales at the moment because of all the quangos, the numerous quangos we have that are appointed to the Welsh office. But I'm very disappointed of the campaign, especially in my area. A few last-minute leaflets through the door, and that's it, really.
Okay, and Steve Brine, you feel that actually here in England you should have had a say in all this?
Absolutely. I think we've had one result in Huw said there's 21 to go, and I don't think we can possibly say that Wrexham is in any way representative. But 42% turnout, that must show something. I think what it shows is that we've got one of the most popular governments this century throwing their full weight behind it, the full weight of the Prime Minister, who is massively popular. And we've got 42% of the people turning out. They voted no. That's not a great surprise. A lot of the people who live in Wrexham work in Liverpool, come to Liverpool and do their shopping, watch the regional media and read the regional papers, the Liverpool Echo. And they've said no. And I think the same as in Scotland, the people were uninformed and they made the choice in Scotland because the national identity is stronger. But in Wales, I think they've not been very well informed, and I think that at the end of the day, they might well vote no.
Alex, there was obviously a very strong yes vote, yes vote up in Scotland, and in particular enthusiasm amongst the younger generation.
Yeah, I mean, it was an overwhelming yes vote. I mean, 73%. It's a shame that the generation gap's not the same in Wales, because I mean, I thought the young people in Wales should be more enthusiastic about a young Parliament for Wales, a new Wales. And I'm quite disappointed, actually, by the turnout. It seems fairly low, and probably that would be amongst young people as well.
But it certainly doesn't look as though, as people had hoped, that the Scottish yes vote would give this huge boost to Welsh devolution hope.
No, it hasn't, and some people had forecast that it would, and it's a shame, rather, that it hasn't, actually. I expected there to be a lot of better turnout, and I expected that there would be a momentum from the Scottish result, which was a massive result for Scotland. And I thought there would be some kind of knock-on result for Wales, but hopefully it'll be a yes vote anyway.
Bethan, do you get a sense that young people are more enthusiastic about the Welsh Assembly than the older generation?
Well, I felt it talking to the people in my area, especially in school, in the sixth one, we do discuss it a lot. And then talking to the older generation, they're very precarious about going into this voting and what it is all about, because they're very unaware of what we are offered.
Just frightened of change, perhaps?
Yeah, I'm sure it is, because they just don't know, they're very unaware.
And very briefly, Steve, not really much of an issue, even here in Liverpool, Wales just round the corner.
Yeah, I think the young people in Wales have not turned out, and I think the Welsh people have not turned out because they've been offered a pretty poor show. In Scotland, they were offered a really good Scottish Parliament with tax varying, which changed from tax raising powers. Whereas in Wales, they've been offered an assembly, very little more. I think the Welsh people have thought, well, yeah, we'd turn out if we were being offered something good, but all we're being offered is a mere assembly, and you have to question the reasons why the government are doing it. I would see it as more of a devolution of responsibility, to palm things off the government's plate.
Thank you very much, all of you. Now back to Huw in the studio.
Carol, thanks very much indeed. Now, just to let you know that we have one result in from Wrexham. That was a 9.5% majority against. One no vote in, 21 to go. I do have another turnout figure from Bridgend, which is, what is it, about 20 miles west of Cardiff, in South Wales here, and that's 51%. So that's certainly well up on areas like Wrexham that we've had before, and Flintshire. That's the way that's going. We're expecting Newport, I'm told, in a few minutes' time. One of the interesting things during the campaign certainly has been the talk and the arguments between people about what this would lead to, whether if we did have an assembly, whether it would lead to steps towards a greater amount of self-government, and indeed some people fearing that it might lead to steps to Welsh independence at the end of the day. Now, to illustrate some of those points, we'll go over to Peter.
Very revealing indeed what people said to us, Huw. NOP asked about 2,000 people over the telephone the last couple of days in Wales what they thought the best future for Wales should be, and 6%, only 6%, said they wanted independence. Now, 20% said that in Scotland, 6% say it in Wales. So you can see how very low the level of people wanting independence is. Of course, this whole campaign has been about devolution, so perhaps that is a bit deflated, that figure, by the fact that they're not talking about independence now, they're talking about an assembly for Wales. Anyway, what kind of assembly? An assembly with the kind of powers that the Scottish Parliament will have, an assembly with tax powers and legislative powers. A third, 32%, said they wanted that kind of assembly. But an assembly without tax powers, the kind of assembly that the government's pitching for, 19% said they'd like that kind of assembly, the one proposed today by the Labour government. And quite a large 43% said they wanted no change at all on the present situation. Now, that is really quite interesting. And what you have here is the people who want more than the kind of assembly that the government is offering. If we have the 6 to 32, you get about 38%. You get just over a third saying that. But you get, on the other hand, 62% when you add these two together, not wanting to go any further than the kind of assembly the government's offering. So perhaps the government have actually pitched it roughly right to maximise the yes vote for the kind of assembly that they want. So that's a very interesting reflection on the split of views in Wales. Very, very different to Scotland, Huw.
Peter, thanks very much. On that point then, Barry, why the difference? Why the difference with Scotland to that extent?
Well, I think Scotland's got a much stronger sense of civic culture and national identity. And I think the other thing is that in the case of the figures that we've just seen, there clearly is a more substantial minority in favour of a much more extensive legislative body. But the question is, would a policy like that alienate rather more people than a more modified policy? And I think that was the issue that arose also in 1979, that people felt, you know, if we go for the lowest common denominator, it's difficult to generate enthusiasm, but at least you don't alienate so many people. It's a basic problem in Wales. Again, I reiterate the point, Wales is a community of communities.
Robin, it seems on that score, at least, that although Ron Davies may have come up with a pretty ingenious plan, which might not have offended many people, as Barry's saying, it doesn't seem to have paid off in terms of enthusing people, which at the end of the day is the only thing that brings people out.
No, an ingenious plan, as you say, no real signs of enthusiasm there, but I think what we are seeing from the kind of struggle that there has clearly been to get the Welsh people to be enthusiastic even about this limited measure of devolution takes away somewhat from the arguments of the opponents of devolution who say this leads on inevitably to separatism. I mean, Tam Dalyell in Scotland and his argument that devolution is a motorway leading inevitably to independence with no exits. Well, I don't think that's really borne out by the experience of the campaign in Wales.
Thank you both very much indeed. On those very points, over to Glyn on the panel.
Thank you, Huw. Lembit Opic, let me pick up on that point that Barry Jones made just there. The government's proposals are the lowest common denominator. It looks as if that's the case from this poll.
Well, once again, we're playing with words. The important point is that, and we mustn't forget this, this is the most momentous political change in the United Kingdom for over a century, perhaps since the Great Reform Act of 1832. Now, these aren't the kind of things that people speak about on a day-to-day basis in pubs and bars, and doesn't keep them awake at night, but it's a politician's job, it's all of our jobs, to make these matters clear and simple. But above all else, I'm saying, as I said before, it's not the promises we make now, it's the behaviour of the Assembly which will convince people it's the right decision.
Helen Mary Jones, Plaid Cymru gets only 6% for independence, according to that poll. 6% support for independence.
Well, I think the point was made that we're just not talking about independence at the moment. I mean, we certainly haven't been pushing the full self-government agenda hard over the last couple of weeks because we have been agreeing to support these proposals. Now, they're very modest proposals. I mean, it isn't really any wonder that they haven't set the tap on fire. I mean, it's just not very exciting, is it? But it's better than what we have at the moment, which is why Plaid Cymru is supporting it. What we have been pushing for, of course, is parity with Scotland. And while there's only 6% for independence, there's 32% in that poll for parity with Scotland, effectively, for an assembly with legislative powers. I think it's regrettable that that wasn't on the table, but the reality was that what was on the table is what we've got, which is why Plaid agreed to support it. When we have a yes vote tonight, and we will then be looking to push forward that agenda for full self-government, and that will be in the headlines again.
And Clwyd, let's pick up the point that Claire Smith made a little earlier on, that a lot of people in your part of the world are voting out of loyalty to the Labour Party, out of loyalty to a popular government, rather than out of any particular enthusiasm for this particular policy.
I think that is undoubtedly true. I couldn't disagree with that. People have said to me today, for instance, if Tony Blair wants it and the Labour Party wants it, then it must be right for Wales. People feel the proposals are being put forward in the best interests of Wales, and therefore there is a loyalty towards the Labour Party. There is, of course, a feeling that the Labour Party, after 18 years of Tory government, is the future for Wales, and they want, again, to give the Tories a smack in the face, because they see the Tories as being the people who want them to vote no, so therefore, on the basis of the last 18 years, then it must be bad for Wales.
It is true, Nigel Evans, isn't it, that the unpopularity of the Conservative Party hasn't helped the no campaign, has it?
Well, let's also remember as well that we got 100,000 more votes than the Liberal Democrats. We got twice as many votes as the Nationalists at the last general election. So the Conservative Party is still the second party of Wales. But I think what Anne... Well, we are. As votes go, Lynn, you have to accept...
On a proportional basis.
See, no, it's actually...
You're a Liberal.
It's actually, in total, it's amazing how they're going to try and ram this PR thing down my throat
You brought it up,
all
not
evening. But the fact is that you have got a very popular Labour Party, got 54% of the votes at the general election. You've had Tony Blair and many of the cabinet ministers making several visits into Wales to try and push this particular message home to the people of Wales. I've heard loudspeaker bands saying, vote Labour on Thursday, vote yes. So the message has been absolutely clear. And the fact is, though, that I think what must be disturbing, though, is the number of turnout percentages that we've heard so far has not been encouraging at all.
Two visits from Tony Blair in the last few days, Anne-Cloyd. He should have managed to pull a few more voters out from his party than this.
Well, I think it's quite reasonable. It's his government. It's a Labour government. And obviously the Prime Minister, who has put a lot of effort into this devolution referendum, should be seen in Wales 2 or 3 times during the campaign. I see nothing unusual in that.
Well, he has put a lot of effort
but
in.
But he hasn't had much effect, that's what I'm saying.
Well, let's wait and see. We've had one result.
He's also put a million...
We're still talking about this one result, which is no, and it's in Wrexham. Remember where it is. There's a lot more results, 21 more results to come.
Well,
let's wait and see.
Let's go back to Huw and see if he has got any more results for us. Huw.
Glyn, thanks very much. I'm looking at my watch, and I'm not wanting to say some rather nasty things about the efficiency of some of these counts, but it's 2 3/4 hours since the polls closed. If somebody is watching this programme, as I'm sure they are, at the count in Newport, why don't you get a move on? We want a result pretty quickly. And the same in Flintshire, where I'm told we're on the verge. Now, we've had one result in, and there are 21 to go, and I think we're all pretty eager. Barry Jones was just telling me that they're like buses, they all come at the same time. So we're probably on the verge of a pretty hectic period of results. So just before that starts, let's dip again into the Yes campaign party down in the Park Hotel, and Michael Crick is there with a very well-known Welsh face.
Yes, indeed, Huw. I'm joined here by Tyrone O'Sullivan, the chairman of the Tower Colliery. Now, 2 or 3 years ago, Tyrone led a miners' buyout of the colliery. It was due for closure, and the NUM branch there decided to buy it. And he's been heavily involved in the Yes campaign in Wales, campaigning around the South Wales valleys. What do you make of the results so far?
Well, it's the first goal in the first 3 minutes of the match. I don't think it's going to affect the position we're in. At the end of tonight, we're going to have an in-favour yes vote. Totally confident.
But you must be fairly disappointed.
One goes to democratise the media.
Excuse me, sir. You must be fairly disappointed in the low turnout.
But yeah, always disappointed. But you've got to look at the position in America, where they elect the most important man in the world with 50% turnout. And we elect governments in Britain very often with 42% turnout. I'm confident if the 50% of the people come out, I'll be totally happy.
But isn't the danger here that if you do get an assembly, it's likely to be pretty close? It could be that barely 1 in 4 of the electorate's actually voted for the assembly.
No, I think the good thing about elections are that the people who want to vote will come out and vote. Of course, I'd like them all to come out. That's not the point. It's at the end tonight, there's a 50% turnout, and we won it by 1 vote. As far as I'm concerned, we're moving forward, and we'll have a Welsh Assembly. And then we prove to people that the next time it comes about, we'll have a lot of people out there voting. I'm confident we will prove the way forward.
Mr. O'Sullivan, thank you very much indeed. Back to you, Huw.
Michael, I'm going to give the manager of the Park Hotel a ring and tell him to shut the bar. I think that's the only answer to some of the problems they've got down there. Now, what's of some interest, to say the least, in all this, is the way that party supporters break down the support among party supporters for or against an assembly. How many normal Labour supporters would back it? How many have apparently not voted for a Welsh Assembly during the day? So, to discuss that, let's go over to Peter.
Huw, I mean, one of the striking things about the Scottish referendum is the way the Labour Party, for example, stuck together so solidly behind Labour Party, the government's call for a Scottish Parliament. It's a little bit different in Wales, and this may explain why, if Wrexham is typical, it ain't so good for the Yes campaign in Wales. Here is the way the parties stuck together, according to our NOP poll of people in Wales over the last couple of days. Now, Plaid Cymru, very solid. 83% of Plaid Cymru seem to have said yes to a Welsh Assembly. a very solid Plaid Cymru vote then for the Assembly. But look at Labour, 93% in Scotland, very nearly all Labour supporters voting solidly for the Scottish Parliament. Just under 3/4 of them, however, sticking with the Labour Party's policy, so strongly advocated by Tony Blair in Wrexham the other day and so on in Wales. So Labour split, clearly, and we all know it's split, but really split to the extent of 28% of Labour supporters not voting yes in Wales. Liberal Democrats even more split, look at that, 50% of them only supporting the yes campaign, which Paddy Ashdown, of course, has been so enthusiastic about, federal Britain and so on, and the Liberal Democrats in favour of Welsh Assembly, only 50% of them supporting it. The Conservatives, of course, no great surprise, you may say rather impressive that, 9% only of the Tories voting yes in Wales. So there's that fascinating spread there, only Plaid Cymru really reflecting that party enthusiasm that infected the Scottish National Party and Labour Party in Scotland. Huw.
Peter, thanks very much indeed. Intriguing that 9% of Conservatives voting for an Assembly. I'm probably the Nigel Evans' family in Swansea, I would have thought. Who knows? He can tell us in a few minutes. They were fascinating figures, Barry, for the simple reason that on the Lib Dem one, for example, this is a party that prides itself on its radical programme, and it seems from that the suggestion is that half of the Lib Dem voters who've turned out today have not done it.
It is a remarkable figure, that, because the commitment to constitutional reform is even stronger in the Liberal Democratic Party than I suspect it is in the Labour Party. And it's been a commitment of the Liberal Party from Lloyd George's time. Interesting, because a similar phenomenon emerged in 1979 when a majority of Liberal Democrats apparently voted against the proposal. So there does seem to be a mismatch between the leadership of the Liberal Democrats, who have a strong commitment to constitutional reform, and the rank and file members who aren't as enthusiastic about it, at least in Wales.
Is that because we're looking at concentrated areas of support for the Lib Dems in parts of Wales which perhaps are quite conservative, with a small or a big C, and the party is not as radical in those areas as Mr. Ashton would like to think?
Well, I think there's 2 points. I mean, one is the point you've raised, yes, that liberal democracy hasn't made the same kind of penetration into semi-urban areas as it has in the southwest of England. And the other thing is, I think that it may be that Liberal Democrats in Wales are rather older, and there is a kind of a generational skew effect in support for devolution.
The Blair effect very clear, Robin, in that Labour figure, wasn't it?
Yes, I think Huw Smith had a point earlier on when he said that there are probably a number of Labour opponents of devolution who are reluctant to go out and vote against an Assembly because they feel they would be being disloyal to the Labour Party. But I think that Conservative 9% is quite interesting, because there was, after all, a small Conservatives Say Yes campaign, and there's a complication for the Conservatives, because in a way, after the drubbing they've taken in so many rounds of elections, their route back starts with a Welsh Assembly and a Scottish Parliament and the operation of PR. It starts to get them back into the game. They've got no MPs in Wales or Scotland. They control no councils in Wales or Scotland. This starts to get them back into the game. But if things are terribly close on a Welsh Assembly, then there's the temptation for the Tories, having fought devolution, to carry on the fight for some time afterwards. Whereas quite a lot of people in their ranks, both in Scotland and, I suspect, in Wales, are saying, well, this is a chance to draw a line under it, to recast our policies, to have a fresh think, to accept the verdict of the people on Parliament and Assembly, and go off perhaps in a new direction and not be quite so riveted on these issues, and give ourselves a chance of going off.
How on earth does William Hay get from the position where he is today, and people like Nigel Evans, to a position where they're going to start making rather more friendly noises about this concept?
Enormously difficult for him, really, and they couldn't realistically change their policies in any way between the general election and these referendums. But
Robin,
the period of
I'm going to stop you for a second,
them.
Robin, because we're going to the count for Flintshire.
Nifer y pleidleisiau dilys a fwriwyd dros a rwyf yn cytuno a dylid cael cynulliad I Gymru
Yes vote.
oedd.
This is the yes vote.
The number of valid votes cast for I agree that there should be a Welsh Assembly was 17,746, 17,746. Nifer y pleidleisiau dilys a fwriwyd dros nid wyf yn cytuno a dylid cael cynulliad I Gymru oedd. The number of valid votes cast for I do not agree that there should be a Welsh Assembly was 28,707, 28,707. Nifer y papurau pleidleisio a wrthodwyd oedd The number of rejected ballot papers was 118, 118. Dyna ddiwedd cyhoeddiad Sir y Fflint. That completes the declaration for Flintshire.
Well, now then, on a low turnout of just over 40%, we make that to be an 11,000 majority for the no's in Flintshire. A clear blow there for the Yes campaign, and Ron Davis was at that counting centre watching these results come in. Let's look at the figures in detail, Peter.
And it's even worse than Wrexham, of course, Huw, as you said. There we have the result in Flintshire then, tucked up in the northeast corner of Wales. 17,746 yes, green for yes, 28,707 red for no. When you look at the percentages then, 38.2 yes, 61.8, nearly 2 to 1 no, there's 61.8% no. A majority for the no's then of 23.6 in this other area right up next to Wrexham there, which is very much an anglicised part of Wales. A lot of people working up in Manchester, Liverpool zone, coming back and living in Flintshire. So again, not typical of Wales at all. Here we have two results then. Now we're going to tot up the results we have in so far, just two of them. There's our winning post. 50% now, we estimate, of the electorate is likely to have voted in this referendum. 560,000, therefore, is the winning post we can calculate because we know the size of the electorate and so on. There's the yes vote there. Let's see what it comes to so far. 36,320, two results in, 51,156 against a Welsh Assembly. There are the two areas that have come in so far, Flintshire and Wrexham, and the percentages then, 41.5 to 58.5, a majority for the no's of 17%. But again, be careful. This is a very, very non-Welsh part of Wales, if one can put it that way. So are parts of it down here too, Monmouthshire and perhaps Newport as well. We want to see what happens further west. Huw.
Absolutely. 2 down, 20 to go. And as Peter was saying, not totally representative, but having said that, they are real votes, of course. I think what we're all certain of is that it's going to be a pretty close-fought thing tonight, which makes it a pretty exciting evening. Let's go over to the panel for their response to that, Glyn.
Hugh, thank you very much. And Chloe, another no result. 2 to 1 against, nearly 2 to 1 against in Flint.
Well, it's my home county, so I know the area very well. It does look to Liverpool more than it does to Cardiff. A lot of people who live who actually work in Merseyside live now in Flintshire, and a lot of people from Flintshire work in Merseyside. I think we have a great disadvantage in Wales compared to Scotland, in that we have not one national Welsh newspaper, whereas the Scots have a number of newspapers. North Wales has the Liverpool Daily Post, South Wales has the Western Mail, and I think the papers like the Liverpool Post have not been over-enthusiastic.
I think I'm right in saying that the Liverpool Post actually came out for a yes vote.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, but I don't think that it's shown all that much interest, over the last few months. So I'm pleased to hear that happened. But again, like Wrexham, I don't think that this is going to be indicative of Wales as a whole.
It does seem to show, Nigel Evans, that Wales is in fact a divided country.
Well, it's very difficult to say exactly what's happening after two results, and I will take issue with Peter Snow. The fact is that he may say that really these may not be typical because they're so close to England, but the fact is that they are very much part of Wales, and they've spoken, both of these areas have spoken, and both have voted no, despite the fact, and yes, the Post did come out and say that they were in favour of an assembly. The Western Mail in the south was like the in-house rag of the Yes campaign. Today's edition was a complete scandal, and Goebbels could have learnt one or two things from what was going on in the Western Mail today.
They're entitled to their editorial opinion.
Editorial opinion, but you should have seen the front page, pages 2, 3, 4, the letters, columns. It was quite ridiculous. It was over the top.
About the Mirror?
Oh, the Mirror. Yes, the Mirror was exactly the same.
Yeah.
Helen Mary Jones, going back to the result in Flint. I mean, you come from that part of the world, not far away. Must be very disappointing.
Every no vote is obviously disappointing. And one of the ways that the no campaign has been campaigning in a way which I think is very unhelpful in that part of Wales is building on this fear of Cardiff. I mean, what people there don't realise is that all these crucial decisions about funding for their local authorities, funding for their health trusts, are all already made in Cardiff by one man, and I use the word advisedly. And that fear has been built and has been developed by some very unpleasant and very negative no campaigning. But that, again, will be something that the Assembly, when we get it, and I still believe that we will will have to address, and the regional committees that the Assembly will have will be crucial in that.
Let's go back to that breakdown of party support for...
I thought you would, yes.
You thought I would. Only 50%. You're absolutely split down the middle. Only 50% of your party actually support this, when in fact it's been the settled policy of the Liberal Democrats since Lloyd George.
Yes, but bear in mind the earlier conversation that we had. These are not the Liberal Democrat proposals, and while I think it's little short of miraculous that we've had three-party, all Welsh party campaign with Plaid, Labour and Lib Dems working side by side, we were still asking our supporters to vote for a Labour proposal. And the second thing is that there is still, I have to say, a distrust of Labour in the Liberal Democrats. So we've had to overcome two obstacles: the fact that they're not as strong as the Lib Dem proposals, and also the fact that the Labour Party isn't really trusted.
Well, Plaid Cymru, in fact, do appear to trust the Labour Party, because 83% of Plaid Cymru voters are supporting an Assembly.
I think we trust ourselves, we trust the people of Wales, and what we are absolutely certain of in Plaid Cymru is that we can find 60 people here in Wales that can make those decisions about those crucial services better. I mean, for Lembit to say that these proposals fall short of what the Liberals want, well, they certainly fall far short of what Plaid Cymru and what our supporters want. And we've been saying again and again that this is not about self-government, but it is about better government, and perhaps we've done a more effective job about getting that message across internally than Lembit has with Liberal Democrats.
Back to Huw. Glyn, indeed, Denbighshire's coming up. Let's have a look.
Here are the results for Denbighshire. Nifer y pleidleisiau dilys a fwriwyd dros yr wyf yn cytuno y dylid cael cynulliad i Gymru oedd: the number of valid votes cast for I agree that there should be a Welsh Assembly was 14,271, 14,271. Nifer y pleidleisiau dilys a fwriwyd dros nid wyf yn cytuno y dylid cael cynulliad i Gymru oedd: the number of valid votes cast for I do not agree that there should be a Welsh Assembly was 20,732, 20,732. Nifer y papurau pleidleisio a wrthodwyd oedd: the number of rejected ballot papers was 99, 99. A dyna ddiwedd cyhoeddiad Sir Ddinbych. That completes the declaration for Denbighshire.
So, the third vote in tonight in this devolution referendum in Wales. The third no vote, a majority of 6,000 there for the no's in Denbighshire. Those results from the north and north-east, the first to come in. Let's look at those figures in detail with Peter.
Well, we're still over there in the north-east, as you said, Huw, but it's another no in Denbighshire. Up there, this great slab of rural territory, the moors in north-east Wales. 14,271, 20,732 against in Denbighshire. Turnout 50%, rather higher than in Flintshire and Wrexham, a little bit further east, 50%. We reckon it's settling down now at roughly 50%, our estimate of turnout all over Wales. 40.8% yes, 59.2% no, so a majority there for the no's, yet again in Denbighshire, 18.5%. And now let's tot it all up. We've got 3 results in so far. Wales then, after 3 results, there they are, a great big slab of red, 3 local authority areas declaring so far. The yes vote then, going up 550,000, by the way, our target, the winning post now, dropping all the time as the turnout estimate drops. Yes votes popping up here on the left-hand side, 50,591. No votes, 71,888. Long way to go yet, but the no's clearly ahead with 58.7 to 41.3 for the yeses so far. A majority for the no's then so far, 17.4%. Again, watch what happens further west and in mid-Wales. Huw.
Peter, thanks very much indeed. Interesting, because there are 2 Labour seats, of course, in that area of Denbighshire. One of them, Clwyd South, has been Labour since 1987. Clwyd West was won by Labour last time round. Barry, can we now, having seen Denbighshire, which is after all a less anglicised area than some of the others we've been seeing, can we now start to say, well, it's not looking good for the Yes campaign?
No, I think Clwyd as a whole is heavily anglicised. In part of the Deeside, you have an overspill from the Merseyside area, and in the northern part of Denbighshire, you're approaching what is called the Costa Geriatrica, where people from the northwest come to retire. In the rural areas will tend to be more conservative than Labour, I should think. So I think we're still looking at a particular community in the northeast of Wales, and the question is it distinctive, or is it going to be typical of the rest of Wales for this evening?
Robin, those results in, what are your thoughts at this stage?
Well, I think the government will be biting their nails a little bit. Obviously, these are not results which can be taken as typical of the whole of Wales, but you know, in line with what Barry was saying there, I mean, I started my life as a reporter on the Liverpool Daily Post, which covers that area, being chided a little by some of the panel earlier. And certainly it is more of a mixed area. We're starting to move out of sort of English commuter land in the sense of some of the other results that we've had already. So I would have thought there must be some nervousness among the Yes campaign that even if they still get the margin, they still get the victory that they would expect at the end of the day, maybe the margin is going to be pretty close.
We're expecting Newport. I've said that before, haven't I, Barry? How many times?
At least three.
At least three. I think it's for 4 or 5, but we are expecting Newport. Just to give people a flavour there, Paul Flynn, local Labour MP, very strongly in favour of an even stronger measure of devolution than the one being offered today. Alan Howarth, the Tory convert to Labour, that is, obviously strongly behind this policy as well. What are we looking for in Newport on this basis?
Well, I suppose on this basis, one would expect possibly the Noes just to skip it again in Newport. We're looking very much, the results are all coming in from the English border areas. The question arises, are we looking at something exceptional which is unique to the border, the marsher areas, or are we looking at something which is going to spread across the whole of Wales? And we've already seen a difference in the turnout in different parts of Wales. Are we going to see different patterns of voting?
Well, we'll see. Let's nip over to the No campaign headquarters, see what the mood is there. David Cornick is there. David.
Huw, thank you. As you'd expect, the mood is picking up, rather. There was an almighty cheer when the three results we've heard came out. And to discuss those, I'm joined by the chair of the No campaign, Robert Hodge. Mr. Hodge, so far so good?
Yes, so far so good. We are cautiously optimistic based upon the results that have come in so far.
Earlier, there was a little more caution around. Are you surprised at the way those three counties voted no?
We were hoping they would come our way. As we all know, we've always believed the result would be very close.
And what are you looking for from Newport now? You'd expect a no there?
I hope so. I hope so. We'll have to wait and see.
I mean, you're the chair, but you've also been described as funding the No campaign. Do you think it's money well spent?
I think it's money extremely well spent, but I've merely acted as a very small part in this, really. I've been a catalyst, yes, but we've received quite a lot of donations from the general public.
But I mean, here at the party, there are probably more media people than there are foot soldiers. You seem to be.
Well, we've got quite a few people out of the counts actually, and I think you'll find later on, win or lose, I think you'll find they'll probably end up back here.
So, I mean, overall, are you now more optimistic? What are the seats that we should be, the constituencies we should really be looking at now?
I think Newport. I'm wondering about Cardiff. I don't want to venture too many, to be honest with you, but I've got a fair idea of the ones that we'd like to win. I'm very pleased about Wrexham.
Of course, Tony Blair was there last week, but it's. I mean, are you surprised at the way things are coming through like this?
I am very happy with the way things are happening so far. I think it's bearing in mind from where we started. We started with a clean sheet of paper. We have no party political organisation, and we've been fighting essentially what is the Labour Party political machine. And I think, we've done pretty well so far.
I mean,
as a people's movement.
You described it as David versus Goliath.
Yes, and I said that from day one, and I still hold that to this day. It is David versus Goliath.
And presumably you'd hope now for the same result.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because I think a no result, in our view, is the best result for the Welsh people.
So you're hoping the party will perhaps stake up a bit?
Well, yes. I'm hoping to have a drink later.
Robert Hodge, thank you very much.
We're going straight to Newport. Well, now then, is he giving the result or is he not? He's just waiting, I think. Right, I think, okay, well, Newport's about to come, so we'll stick with it. We'll stick with it for just a moment because I think he's about to give the result. It seems a shame to go away and come back again. As I was saying, Newport absolutely crucial, simply because it is the third largest conurbation in Wales. It is absolutely crucial in terms of the actual number of votes there. I'm just looking at my, my list here. It's the third largest, and I think that when it comes, it will be a great test of what Labour has been able to do to its supporters in South East Wales. Barry, from your point of view, just as we wait there for the result, we'll go straight to it when we get to it. Newport itself, when we actually gauge the importance of these sets of results, how important do you rate Newport, given the pattern that we're getting now?
Well, Newport is crucial because it's on the edge of industrial South Wales and Labour territory, and this will be a pointer. As you say, it's the third largest electorate. This will be a pointer as what might happen in Cardiff.
Robin, in terms of the actual importance here, with two prominent local MPs, Paul Flynn, Alan Howarth, to what extent can MPs like that influence local voters? Can they at the end of the day, or do they take a lead nationally?
I'm not sure that on a single issue question like this, that local MPs are going to have that significant an effect on the result. In a general election, you have much more play, I think, of an individual MP's record and so on. But I think this is very much more of an intellectual exercise on the basic single question that is being considered by the electorate. I don't think the individual MP has quite the same play.
It's a fascinating area, of course, Robin, simply because this is an area that can actually consider the whole question of inward investment and the way a future assembly could actually work, simply because, of course, we've seen thousands of jobs come in here in the last few years. Before we answer that, let's go to Newport.
I, James Gregory Ashurst, being the counting officer for Newport County Borough Council, hereby give notice that I certified the following results. In the said county borough, the number of valid votes cast for the proposition, I agree there should be a Welsh Assembly, was 16,172. The number of valid votes cast for the proposition, I do not agree that there should be a Welsh Assembly, was 27,017. The number of rejected ballot papers was 150. And that, ladies and gentlemen, concludes the count at Newport. Could I take the opportunity, please, of thanking the counting team on behalf of...
The result there from Newport, the fourth we've had in, and that means a majority of roughly 11,000 to the no lobby. Now, I must say that earlier today, when I was talking to some of the people in the Yes campaign, they were saying, look, the way these votes are coming in, the way Labour's getting out its vote, it's not out of the question that Newport could vote yes today. Well, that was drastically misguided, obviously, simply because we now have a whopping great majority for the no's. Let's have a look at those in a bit more detail, and over to Peter.
Yet another no then in Newport. In spite of all the hopes of the Yes campaign, they might just perhaps pip the nose there. Newport, here we have this great blob of red down here. Again, not far from the English border. 46% for turnout, well below the half the electorate. Yes, 16,172. No, 27,000 odd in Newport. That is a 37.4% to 62.6. Again, very nearly 2 to 1. And the majority for the no's then, 25.1%. All right, now, we have 4 results in so far. There we are, Wales, 4 results, Newport, and the 3 up here. 66,763 for yes, 98,000 for no. Percentages, 40.3, 59.7. Quite a decisive advantage for the no's in these very eastern areas of Wales so far. Let's just have a look then at the majority for the no's, 19.4% so far, with 4 results out of the 22 in. And we can just quickly list them here so that you can see how they relate to each other. The biggest no in Newport, 25% the majority for those there. Flintshire was 24%, 18% the majority for those in Denbighshire, and Wrexham the tightest, 9%. But they're all no's, Huw.
No, they certainly are. 4 of them. So let's nip over to Glyn and the panel for some reaction to that Newport result.
Yes, Huw, a sharp intake of breath here at that Newport result, and Chloe, not what you expected.
No, not at all. Very disappointing.
And John Prescott was there only yesterday, wasn't he? Great reception in the streets of Newport. What went wrong?
Yes, indeed. Well, I can't answer that question. Again, I can only say that, you know, Newport's in Gwent. Gwent has not always supported some of these views. And I only hope that when the results come from the west of Wales, and the northwest and mid Wales and the south west, then we'll have rather different results.
Well, perhaps you ought to be reassessing what you think has been happening in the South Wales valleys.
I think not yet, because we haven't had any results from the actual South Wales valleys. This is the biggest city, of course, that we've had a result from, but the South Wales valleys as such have not yet declared.
Nigel Evans.
This is very serious. We've now got, whatever happens in the rest of the seats, we've got 3 in the north and 1 in the south. They've all said no. Newport, even I was surprised at, I must say, because even I thought that with the general election result there on May the 1st, and with the fact that you do have some very strong campaigning that took place in Newport, I thought it would be a lot closer. And indeed, I came in here today thinking that if Newport was, which I expected to be one of the first results, had announced that they were voting yes, then I could pack up my bags and walk out. But the fact is, it hasn't been that way, and this is very serious, I think, for the government now, the way that this is going.
Do you think that this result leads you to believe that it could be a no result over the whole of Wales?
I'm not going to count my chickens yet, but all I'll say is, on what I do know, is that even with these results now, the fact that there are some very seriously low turnouts as well, that this is bad news for the government.